I know. Georgian cuisine is, renowned the world over.
Fucking amazing.
But a spice bag,
Dude, it's corned beef and cabbage is like delicious. I don't know.
that's an Irish American thing.
Let them have it.
One
It's
of my
tasty.
favorites. Like I love it. So.
That's fair. Irish people don't know what corn is. That's an American
Well,
thing.
it's corned beef. No, it's not corn. It's
Yeah,
beef
but
that's like. It's
we
like,
wouldn't use it as a metaphor.
But this is the thing, though, is that this is something that I remember someone proved you wrong on a stream, that it actually is an Irish thing.
You can't eat it, yeah.
Oh.
It's just not as common, but it is
Kieran,
an
how
Irish thing.
are you?
Yeah, Kieran,
God,
give
no.
me your Irish pass.
I feel like corned beef and cabbage is like something between Irish and like German. So it's
Yeah.
perfect
Sounds about
really
right.
for you.
Love cabbage.
Yeah, it's so good. Cabbage is like the best.
Well, the Germans are the next level though, because like you guys have multiple types of cabbage.
Yes.
We have one.
We have all the cabbage.
It's just cabbage.
They were clearly more industrialized than you know?
Exactly. The historical record does in fact actually show this.
There's more types of cabbage.
More types of cabbage.
It is very sad that one of the most famous German cabbages, like Grünkohl,
Yeah.
you can't. Whoa, I can't hear myself.
That's fine. Wait.
Yeah.
You can't buy it as it is anymore. Only in some stores. You can only buy it in glasses now. Like, because
right,
you
like
make
pickled.
This,
Kind of, yeah.
you make this dish out of it, and you can only buy this kind of dish now.
Ah.
And not
Oh yeah, well this
So
yeah it
weird.
really made
because it grows here everywhere.
it grows in Germany. Yes, I complain about this all the time.
It's
Like
a winter kale, so you can still buy it in Kaufland sometimes, like
Yeah.
big bags of it. I did.
yeah, but
Oh,
then
Grünkohl
but then,
is
but then
kale,
you,
isn't
yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeah,
But then
okay.
because it's like a fucking hippie bio thing now, then it's
Yeah.
Stupid
it's
because
stupid
it's a
expensive,
kale
yeah.
and it grows here and it's
Yeah.
easy
No,
to
we
grow.
had that in Ireland, kales everywhere, and then it became like the health fad of like kale
Yeah.
chips and
Oh,
stuff.
kale chips are tasty though.
Yeah, but then like the price of it
I had
skyrocketed.
them the first
and,
time in London.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you could grow that shit in your back garden, and it was
When I
like
was 18.
Okay, yeah, this is not the kale hour.
it is the kale hour
Let
now.
us just talk about kale
All right.
instead.
Hey! Welcome to your weekly corner, Späti. I'm here joined by Yulia,
Hello.
Nick.
Hey,
It's me, Kieran, and we are joined by union organizer, podcaster, journalist, researcher Sopo Japaridze for her second return time. Hello, how are you doing?
Well, hello. And you can also hear my cat. So
Hell
Yay.
yeah.
Fan favorite, the cat has returned.
that's right.
Joined by the
Yeah.
cat.
It's Studio Ghibli up in here because the cat has fucking returned.
Oh,
Oh, it's a good movie.
Oh,
it
that's
is. It's a great movie.
Yeah, so we're obviously we're going to talk about what's happening in Georgia, but first
We're talking about, of course, this is an update. Where is Bera? What's Bera doing?
what is Barron doing? I mean, I do actually have an update on that.
Oh, you actually do? Oh, okay. Because
I mean, I'm going to say it now because it's not related to the discussion at the moment, but like I got really like when things
Bera is a foreign agent. He got expelled from Georgia.
born in France, raps in French, suspicious. Yeah, and I do remember as soon as like stuff started happening in Georgia, Nick just messages me being like, "What has Bera said about this?" Because Bera makes his opinions known on a lot of things.
in
like,
his rap songs.
in his rap songs, on his TikTok that used to be very active. That's where we got the hit where he like showed that weird awkward photo where he met Johnny Depp once and told everyone he was a cool guy.
Oh.
And he was on in the whole Amber Heard thing. He's on Team Depp, I guess. I'm not surprised. But the he hasn't posted on TikTok, his main social media, since November last year. And
Not even a Christmas post.
not even a Christmas post, not even an Orthodox Christmas post.
Oh my god.
The last post was just him talking about how hot his wife is. Yeah, classic post. My current understanding of what's possibly happening is in like the beginning of last year, so, like a Georgian teenager killed someone and kind of said it was due to like things that Bera had said online. And I think because that court case has started now, so I think Bera's lawyers have just told him not to like post anything.
Jesus
this.
Christ! I was expecting something way more wholesome.
No.
He ran out of cosplay ideas.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I just thought that then it's like he realized that he just needed to stop TikToking. I don't know. Time to, like go to the studio and do his rap career. But unfortunately,
time to take care of his child and stop posting TikToks.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, no, this is not the Bera update.
No, but
rather.
However, before we get into our main topic, we do need to mention one thing.
What?
Corner Späti Brain Genius of the Year award goes to, breaking news, Macron deciding to bypass the French Parliament to push through the pension reform that everyone hates.
Yeah, well, he threatened to like.
It's an order executive.
Ooh. Well, it sounds fancy now, so it's fine.
Right.
Yeah, this is also after he threatened to fire every member of his party in Parliament who did not agree with him.
You know that the French won't have it.
No, yeah.
They're not having it right now, so they won't have that one.
Would it surprise you to learn that like union officials and protesters were like outside the parliament in like a split second after this came out, and the streets of Paris are littered with fucking riot cops ready for what's coming.
Yeah, but Monsieur Biden, my country yearns for freedom.
I am a petite boy.
Which is literally actually now the perfect transition for now what is currently going on, at least in my opinion, maybe the perfect transition for what is going on in Georgia, because all I'm seeing as just, I'm a dumb boy. I'm very stupid. My main source of media is, CNN,
Radio Free Europe.
Maybe if I'm getting a little zesty, I'll read the New York Times because I love a good op-ed that tells me why, I don't know, Iran needs to be just like turned into sand.
Yeah.
Even though Iran is not in the desert, but whatever. Yeah. I don't know better.
It will be when we're done.
Georgia is apparently another country that then needs to be freed, apparently from Russian influence from, if I'm not mistaken, the governing party that is not pro-Russia. There's protests and I guess before we get into the nitty gritty of these laws that then have been the main focus, these quote unquote Russian laws, which I mean I think we can break down as kind of being ridiculous. Where did the traction from all these people in the streets the last few weeks come, Sopo? Because once more I'm very dumb. I need to know the full story. I think I know it, but it's Georgians just want the U.S., right? They want to be part of the West, the EU. If I understand that correctly.
Yes. So yes and no, actually.
Yes.
So the protests that happened for a few days, starting I think March 7th, I believe. First one, they were a response to the Georgian government pushing through these two bills that one was styled after more or less closer to what Russia had passed in 2011, and the second one was FARA, which is more American style, but this was really an attempt by the government to impose some kind of order to foreign influence, but was done in, I don't know, drastically terrible way. And the opposition was able to, not just opposition, actually, they angered everyone who wasn't even part of the opposition. So NGOs and donors and so on, especially the big players, really mobilized and pushed through a narrative that this is a Russian law, despite the fact that it's not Russian law. That actually was it wasn't even inspired by Russia. If you look at the events, what led up to it, one could infer that this was actually a totally different reason why the Georgian Dream tried to do this. and why actually every other country is also trying to do this as well. And so it got, but once you call something Russian, and then you got steam behind it, and there was massive mobilization done, pressure, and so on. And so there was a whole movement that emerged very quickly to crush these two bills, which then ended up being very successful, and they were able to get rescinded. These bills were then formally dropped. But of course, everything that gets painted, and I think there's a reason that the Georgian society, like civil society, of course, not society, because two different things, and opposition uses the terms like Russian and fear of Russia, not only to galvanize and mobilize domestically, but I think that's the only way then you get the Western gaze to then report and see you on the streets fighting against Russia. And it's a story that everyone loves in the West. And I think that's something that's really easy to do. And that's exactly what happened. And of course, it got so much airtime. It was everywhere. Everywhere saying this is new Maidan. This is freedom, fight for freedom against Russia. Like there was really like a fear instilled that Russia was completely like taking over Georgia through this law. So these bills actually. So it was like I can't describe the situation that was like a few days before the protests and during the protests. Like it was total terror. Everybody was saying like it was the end of the world, like the end of Georgia, pressuring each other that this is the last stand. If we don't do something now, then this is over, And so it was very stressful. And yeah, that's when the protests began. And the youth that were part of the academic system of these mostly private universities that have been sort of pushing these anti-communist, pro-free market and freedom and so on kind of ideology on these kids for a long time. They ended up coming to the protests and really filling it up with huge numbers. Because the NGO world for a while was like, who's going to defend us? Because like the people hate us, and so like, who's going to come to our defense? And that was a real fear. And then the students came, and now everyone's obsessed with the students and being like Gen Z, is the best generation. And
oh no, that is bullshit.
You have to see the Facebook post. There's like 3,000 posts written every day how this generation is better than us. And how,
oh my God, that sounds.
That kind of hurts.
Yeah. And then my favorite actually was when you had this like oligarch, Georgian oligarch, who like brought in Coca-Cola.
Hell fucking
oh my God,
yeah!
that reminds me of the Kendall Jenner.
The Pepsi commercial.
The Pepsi commercial. I know, wrong cola, but it doesn't matter, because if you just drink a Coca-Cola. Yeah, everyone's gonna hug.
Yes,
I love the
exactly.
the like twofold of that though. Yeah, like the twofold of like one that peace, and also two Western.
Yeah,
Western influence and whatever.
Santa is gonna join.
Yeah, Santa's gonna overthrow Russian influence in
drinking a Coke
in Georgia. I guess like a question that I have too before like. The thing that I was so just confused about, I guess, because I mean, in brief familiarity to Russia's law, because Germany made a huge stink of it, because whenever Putin wanted to, I mean, however legitimate or illegitimate it is, it doesn't really matter. Russia has this law. A lot of other countries have this law of these, national registries for, quote unquote, foreign agents. It's, I believe in Russia and in the United States, it's about 20% of your funding. If it comes from it, you have to then register yourself as being that you're receiving money from a foreign nation or whatever, this and that. Yeah. And but yeah, so in the Russian case, it was always like, Germany would flip out because, Putin would close the like Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and you know what? Part of me kind of wants to believe that the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is always also probably so petty that they wouldn't register, but who knows? Putin's a dick. needless to say,
I'm just very curious with what the like foreign influence of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is in Russia. It's just like a picture of a Volkswagen car being like, "Hey, wanna fuck it? Look at this sexy German-made car."
Yeah, but Georgia's not really one of the countries that comes to mind, at least, of a country that then would need to possibly monitor national influence or monitor influence from foreign powers elsewhere. Where did this move come from? Was it simply a power move to kind of show that then, oh, hey, we're trying to become a bigger I don't really see the logic behind a law like this for a country like Georgia. Maybe I don't understand fully the geopolitics behind it, but could you give maybe where did this come from? Was it always a discussion point in Georgia of maybe the last couple of years? Was it actually maybe not, I don't want to say that Russian influenced or whatever, but was it because they've been seeing neighbors passing similar laws? It seems like an odd law for a country with the geopolitical position and stance of Georgia to doesn't seem very common. That's something that then the U.S. or France or Germany or whatever, I don't know, bigger powers internationally would do, or Turkey would fucking do that for all I know. Georgia slips under the, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but it's Georgia's not a country that then is covered. You're right, rightfully so, that then whenever protests do come up, it needs the fervor of something, like you said, the anti-Russian stuff. But what were the real origins of this?
I think it's actually quite relevant for Georgia because there have been many things that have happened. I mean, first of all, it's well known and it's obvious that the U.S. Embassy, first of all, decides the elections every time. I call it the viceroy, the U.S. Embassy is the viceroy in Georgia. So as far as foreign influence, it's
already there.
It's
well established.
Every single nook and cranny in Georgia is foreign influenced. But I think that what's happened, I think is really important is, so Georgia has certain romanticized versions of the West, right? So it's really easy to sort of manipulate public opinion because there's all these assumptions behind it and premises. And one of them is that I think Georgians in general have an inferiority complex in relation to the West. So in general, always assumed Westerners are telling the truth more, the Westerners are better. And you can sort of dictate through foreign influence domestic policy. And what happened many times was that the opposition, or even just example of Frontera, an American company, would bribe as in lobby, give money to U.S. politicians, and then they would make statements against Georgia, which then would become national news. So this happened multiple times, and it happens all the time, actually. And so there's UNM opposition, Saakashvili. His mom, through FARA, actually through U.S. laws, they found out that his mom was paying $1 million or more dollars to lobbyists in the U.S. to keep writing and to make statements and sort of keep pressure from the U.S. on Georgia to release him from prison. And so there's just, and especially is also the EU Parliament members are also close with UNM. They might be part of the same right-wing coalition. And so there's a lot of support. They continuously have used the Parliament, EU Parliament, as a venue to advocate for Saakashvili, and even had his children, his mom there, last year, I think. And
even this year I've seen. Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Even this year I've seen
especially European Union councils
debates. Yeah, exactly. Debates
for
on
Georgia. Yeah,
exactly on the release of Saakashvili.
UNM is a part of the European People's Party, so that's CDU,
exactly.
Forza Italia, things like that.
Okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, thanks for saying that. Yeah, so it's clear that there's a lot of lobbying happening from the opposition. And the Ukraine government is actually a great example where the Ukrainian government, Zelensky has been sort of waging this like verbal like insults and like threats to Georgia, and even there was even time there were like diplomatic relations were like really at all-time low, and so keep saying that Georgia's not doing enough, and like they're pretty much like pro-Russian, and Saakashvili needs to be free and sent back to Ukraine, and like really strong language from Zelensky, even putting them in like lists of like countries that they don't like, that have not been like supposedly should have not shown solidarity to Ukraine, and so on. And so there's been a lot of pressure from the Ukraine government. So a lot of pressure from the EU Parliament, a lot of pressure from US politicians, and the EU candidacy that we were rejected last year really unfairly when Moldova and Ukraine was not, was another sign that all this negative press publicity of the opposition and groups tied to the opposition were lobbying foreign governments, right, to tarnish Georgian Dream and tarnish Georgian Dream's whole mission is to get into the EU. They're the ones who really have taken the steps from the beginning, and calling it pro-Russian, and then lobbying to get Bidzina, Ivanishvili, like to get sanctioned. Like they even lobbied for him to get sanctioned. So like it's been an actual war between the opposition and civil society. Some parts that are tied to the opposition, some big players in civil society, and so. This was my thinking is that they've seen that they've actually used FARA in the U.S. They also saw Qatar and like how money was being given to EU members, parliament members,
literal bags of money.
Yeah. So I think they were like, I think we should try to push have some transparency, control some of these influences, because they're also vying for their last chance to get EU candidate status this year. So they're thinking that these people, the opposition and civil society tied to them, are deliberately trying to sabotage us. And so if we expose them by people being able to see that they're getting all this money and the media being complicit with this, which, they're all foreign funded, or they're government or foreign funded, there's no independent media. So if we do, I think that through this system of tit for tat that's been happening, actually not even tit for tat, just a lot of like using foreign bodies to change domestic policy. Why Georgian Dream, at least the fraction actually that introduced it, that was the thinking behind it. It was not influenced by Russia, because after Russia, there's been many countries that have adopted it. And also just now, I can tell you, EU is going to probably adopt it. Canada has started talking about it. And so this is a time, and part of Bosnia-Herzegovina also took this same bills. So I think there is a move of sort of more heightened.
Why didn't I hear about any of those other countries doing it?
Because on purpose, they would never tell you that. This is what propaganda is. Except when you have people like getting water cannon sprayed, holding the EU flag, then you can't be like, "I'm sorry, lady. Actually, you've been misled." Like it's like. It's so emotional, right? That's the whole thing. We're not actually logical. Human beings are not logical. We're emotional, so we're easily manipulated.
Economics tells me differently. I don't know. Like,
right, we're all rational
rational. Yeah,
we're all information. Symmetrical information, making the perfect choice. Yeah,
we're all rational consumers, which is why I bought the car which had the picture of the naked lady on it. It was a rational purchase.
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, no, I think the thing that really jogged my memory with this, I completely forgot that Georgia was rejected alongside Ukraine and Moldova. And yeah, just the absolute hilarity of that, then saying that then one of those countries is more corrupt than the other was just laughable.
Yeah.
And secondly,
Exactly.
it's like now it's, I mean, obviously, we don't need to touch too much on it about how the EU is parading around Ukraine. This is obvious. They've been doing it the whole entire time. But that, yeah, I mean, the sense around that of trying to make yourself then, one, I guess this is a very clear means of combating corruption, technically, of like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to rid ourselves of foreign influence, which Europe does. I mean, the EU does care about, Russian influence in Georgia, no matter how realistic or unrealistic it is. And they have the exact same fear in Armenia. They have they have the same fear in Azerbaijan. They just don't admit it because they're pumping their gas from Azerbaijan. Just isn't that hilariously stupid chart from Kenneth Roth today?
It was Kenneth Roth, yeah.
That just, I don't know what it even meant, but it just was like their relationship to Russia. It's like,
we've analyzed the vibes of several countries.
It's like, for fuck's sake, like, Germany probably has a similar rating to some of these countries based on just like economic relations up until last year. And even then, Germany is still getting pumping a lot of money into the Russian economy still.
Yeah.
Obviously because sanctions have
Well, like the glaring omissions from that list was like
Azerbaijan,
Turkey, and Israel,
Yeah.
which are three countries that still do a lot of business with
Yeah,
Russia.
of course, and allow Russia to have a lot of diplomatic, have a lot of diplomatic ties with them, and who haven't actually severed completely ties with Russia. Not that any country technically has, because
Well, not really, no.
No.
But like, yeah, the thing that always, so like, just to also be clear, this isn't necessarily a bill that would like stop foreign influence. It would just declare it. It just like is a transparency thing, right? Like if this bill was
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, so there's two bills, and this is actually another thing that they did. And I watched all this stuff, and I'm reading it still. It's like what they did was they analyzed the first bill, which was like 20%. You have part of this registry, which, by the way, during the parliament sessions, the government was like, we can call it something else if you don't like the word agent, because they were like the word agent, and they were like, we can call it, subjects or registry or something. But of course, that was.
I liked foreign bodies when you said that, because that reminds me of bodies in spaces, and that seems very in vogue in like a lot of kind of postmodern scenes of things, and we're all like into that, right? That can really sell it to the West, I think.
Yeah, maybe I'll work on it. Like, I'll tell them PR, like, here's some pointers. You should do this instead, like bodies.
Some podcaster in Berlin told me this. Trust him.
Coca-Cola presents
I will,
foreign
like,
agent law.
I will tweet and tweet at the government.
Sponsors,
from Berlin, like.
I have an idea.
Yeah, I got an idea. Sponsored by
foreign agents.
Yeah. Sponsored by Coca-Cola and Apple.
I mean, that would be, if this law passed, that would be like a Patreon goal. We get on the registry by sponsoring some NGO. Just like we have to be listed Corner Späti podcast.
Yeah, so much money. 20% of their funding is coming solely from us.
So this was a registry of 20% or more funding. You would be registered like a database, and that could be easily searched by anybody. So then they were like, this is like Russian, and they were like, oh, okay, then here we'll do another bill and take it word by word from U.S. FARA law, which doesn't require 20% registering it. It just has like more vague and broader implications. Anyone could be implicated, people or NGOs or whatever, if you are actually working for a government on behalf of a different government, And so
why does that sound more sinister?
It's worse than the first one, actually. Yeah. It's
this sounds so scary.
And you can also go to jail. Like, you could actually go to jail for this.
Shit.
So wait, you mean to tell me like the Russian bill, which is like still shitty, is somehow not worse than like literally than having like, I don't know, like the CIA just like, about to like drone strike your house or whatever they're allowed to do if they're like pass this bill.
Yeah.
But get this. So what they did was they analyzed the first bill, but they didn't analyze the second. And they just kept saying, like, oh, in like in the FARA law, first of all, they just kept saying it's Russian and it's nothing to do with America. But then when some had to like say that it was also U.S., they would say FARA law doesn't go after NGOs or civil society, doesn't ask them to register. But the thing is, that law didn't say that way. That was not the language. They were trying to say like 20%, like the first bill. They kept melting it sort of with the second bill and saying like, then they'd have to register as 20% and then be tried as foreign agents like FARA. So, it was clearly not the full truth and mixing people up. And because the government very explicitly said, we will either accept one bill or another, not both, right? So
okay, I have a solution then.
You're gonna fix.
Yeah, sorry. So you can finish, but yeah.
Nobody wants a solution there, don't you?
No. I got it.
This is all about protesting.
No. This is like all right. Okay, remember West, good. Yes, America, capitalism. What is it? We said Pepsi, Coca-Cola, all that. All right. I don't know how much everyone here. I mean, Europeans know. I mean, they obviously know. The year it's what, the late 80s, early 90s. That pesky communism thing is about to fall in the West. And what do you got going on in the United States? That's right, the Pepsi challenge. All right, get every Georgian and do a double blind challenge of each bill, and then they get to pick which one's the better bill.
Oh.
Well,
God damn it.
So you get your American capitalism and your fucking garbage ass law. That's still passed by the United States. So you can even call it the Pepsi Challenge law for all I fucking care.
This is, I think there's a lot that could have been done in that case. But like, I think what's interesting is that like, the FARA law, they kept saying that this was enacted in 1938 and this was based on fear of like Nazis and stuff, and like completely never talking about the next like, I don't know how many years, like 60 years or something afterwards that it's been used. Yeah. And especially, I will quote Rolling Stone from 2019, since Trump took office, there have been almost as many criminal prosecutions under FARA brought in the last 18 months as there were in the preceding 40 years. So U.S. has actually, the liberals, let's say, not even you, part of the U.S. ruling class, the liberals, the Democrats, have been using this to go after Trump and expose his quote-unquote lackeys, as Rolling Stone, I believe, said that. And so it's been a really active, and this is why also Canada is going to get one as well, because this is more about liberals being afraid of the so-called the far right or the anti-vaxxers and, like the sort of the people who became the enemies the last couple of years. Anyone who's anti-establishment have become, and generally it's unfortunately, it hasn't been the left wing that's been the one that they're afraid of. It's the right wing, because they're actually a lot more organized and have way more of a voice than any of the left wing. So they've been mostly targeting right wing and Russia connection with that, as in like mostly about Trump. And they're also very much afraid of Russian and Chinese influence. So they want to either make this law that was mostly on the books now become much more active. And then Canada also do the same thing, and EU doing the same thing because of Qatar, right? So because the Gulf states are too active, and now the Iran and Saudi Arabia have
they're friends again.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is a real fear. So the West is actually trying to get these laws to fight against the Russian and the Chinese and the Gulf state influence.
Yeah.
While Russia at first tried to do the, against the US influence. And then Georgia was just trying to kind of this because they actually had been using the Western FARA law, had seen how it worked, and they thought that was, I'm assuming, because they actually have said this in Parliament, this is how we found out that the opposition, Saakashvili's mom was spending money on lobbying is through these open searches, there's all these lobbying and all these databases in the US, which also I use, Open Government and so on, and Open Secrets. they were like, what's wrong
yeah.
with that? You know, so let's try to do this here so we can then, people can then see, because they are like this disinformation, how Georgian politics being manipulated by the opposition. So maybe if we did this, that this would help us, right, state our case more, because Georgian Dream is not exactly a very brave party. They've mostly just been eating shit for years. And it's really the last couple years that they sort of got a backbone a little bit, which then have been used against them. And now they're being blamed for everything that's ever gone wrong. And EU candidacy is apparently all their fault, because once or twice they talked back to like the US ambassador. How dare they? You know, like this is the
can't talk back
you
to
cannot
the American
back.
overlord.
Yeah.
So like,
It's apparently rude.
This law, like, okay, so countries like Canada, the EU, United States, or like the US already has one, but like Canada, the EU, kind of like adopting this law really just makes sense for the current climate of like gearing up for the new Cold War. It's like the same thing as like people who work in like the European Union aren't allowed to use TikTok anymore.
Yeah, of course.
Same with the Dutch government is like Dutch government officials aren't allowed to do that either anymore.
The Netherlands is literally about to like send themselves back into the fucking Stone Age because they're about to rip out all of their Huawei run cables and shit.
Yeah.
It's still like, I mean, it is beyond like liberals right now are like, you know, in the dumbest state that's possibly imaginable. And I think it's one of, I mean, the biggest contradiction of it happened right at the beginning of the war when you had all these powers by being like, okay, yeah, we support Ukraine, this and that and that. And like, don't get me wrong, I understand that then some of these media outlets like fucking suck, but like having like the US and all the European Union just like completely ban anything that then was like a Russian media outlet because of like quote unquote disinformation, well then I don't think they have a single fucking clue what's actually going on in Ukraine themselves.
Well, like,
you know?
I mean, but this also kind of gets to like the criticism of Russiagate, which was kind of like,
exactly. It's this liberals using any excuse to one just like, you know, kind of whitewash the authoritarianism that they just really want to do.
Well, they kind of want to pretend that the problems of like everyone voting for the game show host president
with Russia
was like not them. Like this couldn't be happening in America. But like this is different from I feel like this is a very different case from as someone also from a small country like Georgia, which I think, to be fair, influence in Georgia, like anyone with their head screwed on straight, like yes, the EU and then the West versus like Russia are both countries that kind of want Georgia on their side. Like there is like a desire for Georgia to be in one sphere of influence over the other. I get the impression of talking to Georgians that they're also kind of aware of this. A lot of them would side more with the EU, as you could see with that like woman with the EU flag and the power hose or whatever. But like it's very obvious. Like Armenians know the same as well, that they're kind of like torn between these two worlds. Yeah. Ukrainians just outright admit it as well, that like the whole reason Maidan happened, the whole reason like the invasion happened is that we're like, we want to go one way and Russia wants us to go another. So that's a very different reason to have a law like this than everyone voted wrong and I'm scared kind of shit or whatever, like that Americans or Canadians are probably thinking. But yeah, it's also, I wanted to ask, you said part of Bosnia has implemented this law? Or
yes, or they're trying, and they got the same they got the same condemnation from the U.S. Embassy with the. I think they just like reused the same letter.
Oh hell yeah! I'm gonna guess it was it was Srpska, wasn't it? That's the part of Bosnia you're allowed to be mad at. Yeah.
So but like you have to also think back, like the climate that like how a lot of I think like a lot of Georgian players have agency to destroy Georgia as well as like foreigners, like I don't think it's like just foreigners, but I think that it's very obvious that everyone knows how you can manipulate, because every comment, every word a foreign official says gets printed and becomes mainstream news and the front page. So you can create a feeling of things that that's actually not true, and you could have the most like bullshit, who cares kind of U.S. representatives that no one gives a shit about, like write statements, and it becomes like, oh my God, U.S. is mad at us, right? So it's like really you really should be watching what the U.S. sort of embassy says and the president. That's always the most important. But then nobody understands that maybe all this huge Congress can have all these different people just being bought and said whatever they wanted. So it's easy to dupe when you don't have very good media. You don't have people. You don't have a lot of trust and a lot of very chaotic sort of all the time, like hysterical events always happen in Georgia, like one hysterical event after another hysterical event, you never have time to think and you're not really allowed to question very much. So Facebook is like really the place where everybody just kind of writes everything. It's like the only forum people have. And so, which are almost always, you could just tell how easily they can be manipulated into things because you could just show them 1, 2, 3 things and they believe it. You have like Radio Freedom, which is like Radio Liberty, right. Georgia, yeah. Which actually is, if they write something, then people are going to believe that over someone else, the government saying it or anybody else. And so there's definitely a way to manipulate public opinion. And I think US knows this really well because they have been working on disinformation for years. And they're, actually I was listening to Matt Taibbi yesterday and he was like, all the counterterrorism stuff, when that kind of went down, they just used that money and reformatted it into disinformation. And so like the money had to go somewhere, right? All these jobs and like institutions. And so counterterrorism was just reformatted to like now disinformation. And the Twitter file stuff really kind of shows that the US government is in everything, right? Controlling, looking at, scanning like posts and so on, and making sure that certain messages don't go out there, and certain people get sidelined. And U.S. Embassy was also giving out a lot of Russian disinformation, Russian propaganda grants. So Georgians, Georgian civil society, mostly, they think that they're creating something on their own, but they're not. They're very much dependent on whatever the priorities of donors are, and they just reformat to that because they're just trying to get money, right? So if like the U.S. Embassy and other partners, so-called partners, start saying, oh, we're now looking for Russian disinformation, everyone's going to be like, oh, I want to get this grant, and I'm going to start looking for Russian disinformation and propaganda. And often they like couldn't find that much. So they would just like make these spurious connections. And then of course, no one's going to know that that's actually not a legitimate connection. That could just be wrong. And so then there's a climate of everyone's laser focus looking for everything as a sign of Russian propaganda, And so then you have this whole like part of civil society waiting for, not waiting, but like on guard to anything Russian, right? And assumes that every other news is legitimate, right? Every other country, the Western countries in this case, are not propaganda, right? There's only one propaganda, and that's coming from the Russian side, right? And so even having that level of analysis, people don't have. So they just assume like default, the truth, the normal, the good is like Western, and like everything else is propaganda. So you created a society that already had Russian, like a whole history of the last 30 years of everyone calling each other KGB agents and, everything like Russian and Soviet. You have organizations that are based on recreating memory against the Soviet Union, and also just making stuff up half the time. And then you have movements like Shame Movement that just pretty much uses like anti-Soviet, never back to the USSR and stuff like that. Tells their kids who don't know anything, like young kids, like this is bad, this is fascism. Like it's pretty much the same thing, right? Nazism, Soviet Union. And of course, Soviet Union is like, they consider also Russia and Russian occupation. So you have an environment that's already very paranoid. You have two what they consider occupied territories, but others might consider that they actually are not occupied, but they're just granted their own independence through the fear of Russian military. They're sort of secured by Russian strength, but it's actually run by the ethnic groups that are there, Abkhazians, Ossetians. So it's like two different even understandings of those territories, the separatist territories. And so then you have people, everywhere you go, 20% is occupied by Russia. You have it on like tickets, like getting a coffee, you'll have 20% is occupied by Russia in your receipt.
That's exhausting.
Yes.
My God.
It's everywhere. And then you have the U.S. Embassy in the Western, like, I'm not sure. I think I want to check if EU was giving out kind of grants like this, but like Russian also propaganda on top of it. So it's a society that's just really triggered, and like every small thing can just pretty much set them off. And then at the same time, they're constantly doing these like polls, like, do you want the EU? And then the EU like takes these polls, and whenever they see like a certain region or ethnic group who is like not for the EU, then they work more, put more money in there to get them to be more pro-EU. And they used to ask, like, what do you think about, do you want to be with Russia? Do you want to be with EU? And most people were like, I want to be with Russia and EU. Because they're like, why should we choose both?
Why not?
That's adorable. Why not?
They stopped asking that question. They just ask about EU now. So like, it's socially engineered. I mean, I'm seeing it, and I don't see any of this as like anything organic. This is very much top down. People know what they're doing. It's just that everyone sort of agrees so much that hold the levers to any of the civil society or media or government or parties. They all are in just huge agreement. So like anybody who deviates from this is just looked upon as like crazy. And there, of course, there are a few foreigners in Georgia as well, like expats who help this process to make sure that it's running in a certain way. And that's the end. I mean, that's the end of the story. It's really easy to make everything pro-Russian. So you don't even have to really explain laws very well or bills or whatever it is. You could just say Russian, and this happened in Russia. You don't need to know that after Russia, Israel also got the same law, like U.S. has a law that's actually been used. Around the world, there has been more and more of this disinformation or paranoia needing to crack down. If you don't know these like global trends, if you're not paying attention and if you're not researching, you're not going to know. So it does look very much a straight line, especially if you don't understand how details, right? The devil's in details. So if you don't really go in details and the government did the shittiest job I've ever seen ever. It's like they sabotage themselves, honestly. And just looked like they were also very thoughtless. They're like, one bill, okay, you don't like this bill, we'll just put another bill. And like, you should have thought more about this. Like, and what exactly does it mean foreign influence in a country that's so full of sort of foreign influence, that need to be really defined as well. And they just made new enemies because everybody started panicking. Like, I've gotten money from a donor before. I was invited to some kind of 5-star hotel labor rights that was done by some, foreign funded NGO. And so like the implications, everybody thought like, I'm going to be labeled as an agent. And then the donors telling their people their grantees, like the people who receive grants, like NGOs, like, if we have to register, we're not going to register, we're pulling out, you're going to have no money. And the NGOs are like, oh my God, we're going to have no money. And then the NGOs were telling their beneficiaries, like, we're going to close down and you're not going to have any more services. So it's like chaos, complete chaos. That's the middle class of Georgia, is like the NGO sector, like that was going to be wiped away. That was a fear that was instilled.
Can't happen. Not the middle class.
Yeah.
Sorry. I have another question, because I think after the withdrawal there was a burning of the EU flag by Martynenko and his conservative movement. What is their stance on the bill?
So a lot of people, though, it's not really. It's hard to say this now because it doesn't look like it. They have angered so many people. I would actually like to see what the feeling is, because Georgian Dream, for many other reasons, they've actually just started making some small gestures towards social policies, like nurses' minimum wage and so on, and like increase a little bit of the maternity fee and a little bit of social insurance and like help social programs. So not a lot. There's just a lot of economic problems, and that's actually on top of everyone's list. Every single poll thing you'll ever do in Georgia, like top 5 things are always like economic, right? But then, of course, I can't get people out for anything related to economic things because I don't have the TV. I cannot convince people. I cannot get to them. And it's media that trains people to come out for only these political anti-Russian things. And doesn't give you the platform to talk about anything else. And so there's already a lot of anger towards the government over decreasing of this. There's a pandemic, there's a war, so there's problems. The prices are really high, and lots of people are struggling. Very few social programs, and so with that, and also how they botched it up. Most people will say, and I actually asked people, I asked like taxi cab drivers, I asked like random women on the street, like some of our members, like I was just like interested. And most of them were like, man, this bill should have been here like 10 years ago. We wouldn't be in this mess if we had this bill, like a lot of support for this because they also want to see more transparency. Because they said, and this, I think this is very correct, there are laws being written by foreign lobbyists that cater to foreign needs and not local Georgians. And that's actually true. It's true in the sense that businesses, like foreign business or just businesses, are being catered to. There is lots of breaks for foreigners. There's all these like nomads, like come here, you can live here and work here, and it's so great. Georgia's so cheap, and they've like bought up, or they live in all these apartments and all these expensive things are for them, and then all of Georgia is like left out, So like I can see how that angers people. They feel like the government, and it's true, like governments so far have been catering for others than Georgians, foreigners, for tourists, for companies, and that angers that the lobby, like transparency and like lobbying to become clear would actually help them. They would understand things more. And but after what happened, how badly it was botched up, and also despite the fact I think the police were, compared to other countries in a comparative sense, a lot more professional and like were able to clear out very fast using tear gas. I'm surprised no one died. I honestly thought people were going to die. I was like very worried. When I've seen in other countries, what I've been a part of in the US, this was much more professional than what I've experienced or seen in other countries. So I think that also, still seeing though young kids like getting tear gas, like that makes people angry. And so I could see people turning on Georgian Dream because of those things. And the conservative movement also felt emboldened because they were kind of kept under wraps by Georgian Dream, and they feel like they back down and they're losers now. And so they were like, fuck this.
Yeah, there's some ressentiment there. Because
it's about strength.
After they left the coalition, kind of.
Yeah. Exactly. So they're like, the thing is, Georgian Dream is weak. Like I've never thought they were strong. Like I never thought they had like
the strong Georgian Dream.
the party based on the richest guy's rapping son's career? No, why was this a farcical party with no backbone? Well, it's crazy.
They back down every time like anything happened. They would just back down, and it was only through like the last couple of years that they've actually started saying things back. It's like, and I think it's also this fear that part of Georgia's side also believes that we need normalization with Russia because that's the only way we're going to get our occupied territories back. So that's actually not like we're going to fall into Russian, this like horrible dictatorship. We need to normalize so we can get those territories back. That's actually a thinking a lot of people have, and they knowing that if we're too aggressive towards Russia in that sense, that we'll lose more territory. And then people are also just, let's face it, war. People are afraid of war, and this has been Georgian Dream's also. Main objective out of 4 governments Georgia has, pretty much 3 governments have been at war, so like there's been, in the early 90s and then 2000s, there have been multiple wars. And so nobody wants to go to war. And then also like, it was interesting to see on Twitter, like the ethnic minorities in the separatist regions, like they were like afraid. They were like, oh my God, if a more aggressive government comes, they're going to try to like take over us again or try to fight us. So they were getting nervous just watching the protests. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And then people were just like, that's just Russian propaganda. I was like, I think like people don't understand, like when you are Georgian, a lot of things, because you're Georgian, you're not afraid of. If somebody screams like Sohumi, which is like the city in Khazia, like as a Georgian, like I'm like, oh yeah, I hear this all the time. It doesn't mean anything, and I don't feel endangered by it. But like if you're actually Abkhazian, you might think, oh my God, they're trying to come after us. Like imagine if Russians were chanting Tbilisi in like a protest.
Yeah.
You know, people were like, oh shit, like they're coming for us. And then if we had fear, nobody would be like, that's just like American propaganda. You know, like people would be like, no, these are legitimate concerns. But here it was like every Georgian was so dismissive. Like, no, it's just Russian propaganda. You're just overreacting because you guys are pretty much tools. Like was like the sentiment I was seeing from a lot of the Georgians. I'm like, I don't think that's the right way to approach this.
No, like there is that aspect now that like, I think a lot of people are recognizing that Russia is sufficiently distracted. Like, 'cause I know Azerbaijan is taking like pot shots at Armenia because like they know Russia can't do like a second front, basically.
Of course. Well, there's first that, and I'm glad that we're on to this topic now about that, because in the sense of
the calls for opening
the discussion about Russia, yes, an opening front, a second, third, fourth. No, but I mean, like the reality of it is, I mean, because you know, as much as Westerners, I mean, I think that hilariously the parallels of the things that are going on in Georgia, a country that then is heavily under the influence of the United States, that no one wants to admit it, is also, we've had episodes on recently how the German media has transformed drastically, where a country that then also half of it was occupied by the United States and half of it also was, you know, whatever, occupied by the Soviet Union or whatever, this and that, and how one of those sides no longer exists. And the method of thought around the media in Germany, particularly, especially with like the war in Ukraine and with Russia, is I don't think I've ever seen more horrible, batshit insane journalism about the, like, again, when I said that, then I don't think a European has a general understanding of what is going on in the war in Ukraine, because their little brain just like can't decipher that you may actually have to like delve into a lot of Russian media sources or a lot of bizarre fucking Telegram groups.
People don't want to know either. It's upsetting.
And that's the thing I always tell people is that, like, if you don't have to be a part of that, you don't have to like look at it for like work or whatever, then don't, because you will be a lot happier in life if you don't have to confront the Ukrainian war. But also then the stuff too of how we discuss about Russia is that then I don't think I've ever seen, like, you know, every other week is an op-ed of like, we analyzed Putin's body language, and, you know, next week he wants to nuke Berlin, or he's dying, or here's what this person said, or he has cancer, or Putin wants to take over East Berlin. And it's like, none of this is fucking true. And yet, how much of the percentage of the German population, I guarantee, if you went and like asked, like, oh, are you legitimately afraid of, like, you know, nukes raining in Berlin? I guarantee you, like, at least liberals, like, and wealthier liberals would be the more afraid people of that group, because they're the ones continuously, you know, like, one, the media is for them because they're the ones, oh, I got to be educated on this. I got to know what's going on with the current situation between East and West that we're in. Oh, China's spooky too, even though I don't want to look at this realistically. I mean, mentioning also the sense too of the, who is it? China and Saudi Arabia, India, then with
the joint drills.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, right.
What?
Russia.
No.
What are you talking
the
about?
Peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Yes.
Wait, you said China, so I was confused.
Because China was the one who brokered it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Saudi Arabia and Iran. Yeah.
And did you hear Ned Price's response to that?
No. What did he say?
No.
Ned Price, who literally is one of the people single-handedly
fan.
responsible for pretty much more or less destabilizing the entire Middle East during the Obama administration, and probably is one of the main culprits of why ISIS exists, said that, oh, this really is, like he like more or less said, the U.S. has always been a partner in the Middle East for peace.
Oh my god, I remember that. Yes, I've heard that. I actually saw the
we are afraid of our footing in the region being like dismantled or something.
China goes in for like 10 minutes. And
it's like maybe
he said the U.S. is basically the peacekeeper in the middle.
Maybe 1,000 proxy wars is not the way you do it. Like maybe being like, I mean, China. I've been saying this the entire time during this during the Russian-Ukraine war, is that China has nothing to lose over this because they can come in. I don't think that their behavior just historically would be pro-imperialist one way or the other because of the history of what the West has done to them. Not saying that there aren't, powers within China who don't want to expand.
I think more concretely, Russia fucked Belt and Road.
Yes.
Because Belt and Road was contingent on like goods being able to smoothly go from China to Russia and then through to Poland.
Yeah, and that's kind of not really happening right now.
That's gone now.
But yeah, I mean, so China has an interest to then stay neutral in this as well, too, which, I mean, because remember, there was all, like, how many people were talking about 2 weeks ago that, China's sending weapons, and then false...
And then
a false report
Xi Jinping
coming
had his speech, and he's actually presented like a plan.
Yeah, a 12-point plan peace thing or whatever.
And Zelensky still wants him in Ukraine, so he invited him.
Yeah, and then the West then has so many things afterwards being like, oh, well, that may be true, but China's sending weapons, and then it's like journalists were asking like, yeah, but where's the source? And it was always just, oh, trust me, bro, and that story disappeared in a week.
The new Cold War thing that we're doing at the moment is
it's fun, isn't it?
Weird.
What's
that? First is tragedy, second is farce.
Yeah, it's like
I wanted to have my own Cold War,
Yeah,
it's not enough to read about it.
It's like I can totally understand then this like kind of the scenario of that. There's like Georgia, and this is probably happening on a much more extreme scale because of just like how I always use the German word of Besserwisser, but I don't know what the English word. Just know it all liberals. Kind of steering the conversation in their way, and the reality. I mean, there are liberals in the West who really want to turn Georgia into a second front as well. Like
we saw calls for that.
Yeah. Which, by the way, they said that was just paranoia and fake news of the Georgian dream. That was also insane. I'm like, the Ukrainian government itself, officials have said it, and and some
the big one that went on Twitter was Visegrad.
One by the Polish government, but it's amazing because. I've seen that these things are happening, and yet whenever Georgian Dream says this is what's happening, you're like, this is completely Russian propaganda. Just I saw it, I can read and I can actually infer, because I don't need a gatekeeper to information to inform me that no matter what I'm seeing, that this is actually Russian propaganda, because I have the fucking confidence, that actually can trust my own ability to evaluate. And I speak English and I grew up in the U.S., so I think that actually what sets me apart from a lot of people is that I'm really fucking cocky. I don't need you to interpret shit for me. I can do it better than you, So I think a lot of people don't have that. It's a privilege. I don't want to speak in these privilege fucking terms, but I realized the other day why I wouldn't succumb to all this pressure everybody else was because I don't need to. I can
because you're built different.
Yeah, and I could always find something else. A lot of people were afraid that if they don't sign some of these save NGOs kind of stuff, that they would lose everything, right? Or they would just be thrown out of civil society or something,
when I think the weird reality is a lot of NGOs, these liberal NGOs would just be the funding comes from France, and a lot of their supporters would be yeah, cool, good. Or it probably there's there's countries great. Yeah, this is kind of the big unfortunate thing about transparency is sometimes it can do nothing. For example, the EU has a really transparent lobbyist registry. You can see everyone who lobbies in the EU. Does it stop them? No. They still just kind of do it.
Yo, they got how much money from BMW? All right.
Yeah. just
Exactly.
someone in Baden-Württemberg just going, yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, Germany has an open registry of how much every politician gets from every company, and there is no limit in this country. And does that stop anything? Absolutely the fuck not.
Oh, yeah. And like there'll be like parties like the FDP being just like, no, that's just good business sense. Just taking money from...
My money looked good. Yes, my money literally is being handed personally to me from VW.
And I just wanted to say that the EU thing that you brought up earlier of like Georgia was kind of like not given candidate status because due to like geopolitical reasons we had to give it to Moldova and Ukraine. That was like largely a symbolic gesture. And while I think the official reason for not including Georgia was to do with like de-oligarchization, like
that thing
corruption.
Ukraine never had an oligarch.
Oh,
No, but you see,
by
like
the way,
that
want to hear something great about that? Sorry, first finish, and then I'll tell you something interesting.
I was just gonna say that, like, I think everyone in Brussels, like, I'm a psychopath who reads like Brussels bubble like newspapers and stuff, and everyone in the kind of like EU bubble is kind of aware that that rule was complete bullshit. It was largely that like we have to give candidate status to Moldova and Ukraine because of the situation, but we also have to try and keep the like anti-immigration right at home at bay, so we can't be seen to be letting too many countries in, because they're like the CDU was always kind of afraid of the like AFD ghost and etc. etc.
Well, that was also the thing too that was coupled with it as well, is that then remember, because everyone was like afraid for like 2 seconds of like, oh, if Ukraine joins the EU, that'll surely show Putin. And that was like Putin from day one was like, I don't give two shits if this country joins the EU. It was always about NATO, you know, which now even like they're kind of like caring less about that. And the Georgia one, you can't even use the argument for either. Like, oh, if Georgia joined the EU, Russia would get pissy because they don't care. Like, at the end of the day, that's a completely like made up bullshit thing. In order to
assuming they had like a guarantee that they would join
exactly
NATO.
Yeah, you know, so it's like even if you were to then get like another stop of like, okay, de-oligarchization stuff like that,
because I think Lavrov has said repeatedly, like he often talks about the fact that like every Eastern European country that's in NATO has also joined, like either the EU is also joined NATO, that like they kind of seem to be one and the same at the moment, because like every neutral country in the EU is like Western. Austria, Ireland. Sorry, Sopo, you had a point about something there. Sorry, we interrupted you.
No, this was really interesting because like one of the things was like, oh, de-oligarchization, right? So that Ukraine was like,
terrible word to say.
Yeah, they were like, Ukraine was like,
oligarchization.
We are going to write this law about de-oligarchization, and so Ukraine wrote it, and Georgia was like, okay, great. So they just copied the law. And then they sent it to Venice Commission. So a lot of bills get sent to Venice Commission to get an expert opinion on the bill, like if it's harmful. It's
EU human rights, or not even EU. It's the Council of Europe.
Council of Europe. Yeah. And so apparently,
you
I'm
would know, Kieran.
I would.
I'm glad you know it. Actually,
I'm not. I'm very upset.
So
I know that because of Poland.
Human rights body ruled that. By the way, Ukraine did not send it to Venice Commission. Only Georgia did the same thing they copied.
I mean, they can proofread their own work at home. It's fine.
Well, it's also the Council of Europe. Like we kind of like we flip a coin every time we want to include, like pretend that thing is important. Like,
who's even the head of the Council?
They were very effective when they intervened in Poland and wrote that thing like, oh, you can't do that.
There's a calendar somewhere in Venice that's like, oh, it's a Tuesday, we're not important. Oh, tomorrow's a Wednesday, we're important, and Friday's casual. Like, I don't know.
I'm just assuming that then they're only important when people are in the office, and because it is like in Austria, I'm assuming it's a bureaucratic office, something like 4 hours a week.
Venice Commission, not Viennese.
Venice,
even better. Yeah. They don't work.
Office closes at 3. We're not accepting any new business presented after 2 p.m.
Yeah. And then just like office closed 4 months of the year.
Well, because it's flooded.
Yeah.
No, right now it's dry, actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the Venice Commission wrote back and said that this law was not good.
Guys, that's a shitty law. Where did you copy that?
No bueno.
Yeah, see, this is why.
But it was said, while in the Venice Commission considers the personal approach as generally problematic, like as a personal person who's an oligarch, it does not.
Generally problematic sounds like, why did you use all these gay stereotypes? That's not. Why is that in the law? That's weird. Don't do that.
And they're like, the analysis of the measures of draft law demonstrate these may lead to violations of fundamental rights protected under ECHR, and that the draft law gives the government too much influence over the process, and like on and on. So it's really interesting that this is like was touted like, yes, the Ukrainians took this. Look how like they're making all these amazing steps. That's why they should be in the EU. And Georgia's like, okay, fine, like we'll just copy it. And then they're like, no, actually, the EU would not accept this. This law the way it is. Like it's just the absurdity of the whole situation. I mean, it's just like layers and layers of absurdity that is never ever delved into, and just keeps being phrased as some kind of Russian propaganda, Russia versus the West. And how Georgian Dream is like Russian party, and like just incredible to me, just to be able to see it at every turn. And yet, I guarantee you right now, like I don't want to go on Facebook because it's like the worst thing ever. Right there, I could go on there and I could probably find like 500 experts, leaders of NGOs, lawyers, whoever, creating an atmosphere saying that this is another thing that Georgian Dream has fucked up. It's all their fault. And so on. And they have like usually some, like they just had some member of parliament who's a right winger who was tied to Saakashvili also make a comment, something like,
yes,
if Georgian people have to choose either EU or the government. Like, so like pretty much saying, like intervening in some fucking guy who no one gives a shit about is all of a sudden in front page news, and everyone's now saying this Georgian Dream is angering Europeans and they're the reasons why we can't do anything. It's all their fault. And instead of being like, what really makes me the angriest, because my pride is hurt in this, is like, you will burn down the fucking country if you think that Russia is like somehow behind something, even when it's not. Yeah. But you will accept the kind of treatment, the way Europeans and Americans talk to us. Like, you don't find any problems with that. You actually get angry with the government for even responding to it. Like, that is the most, I don't know, like self-colonized mentality ever. And it's funny because they also go and they were telling all these government officials and parliament members that they were slaves of Russians, that they were slaves. And that's the word they like to use all the time. You are slaves.
Well, they're getting like pat on the head by the head of the U.S. embassy
exactly.
or whatever. Like,
I mean, it's embarrassing, honestly. Embarrassing. It's like seeing like a scientific experiment or something. We're just like, this can't be real. Like,
yeah, how far can a country get cocked?
Yeah, absolutely. And then enjoy it. Be like, oh, yes, like, please. And then, like, getting angry.
Oh, yes.
My understanding of cucking is that you're meant to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I was about to say, that's the whole point. It's like, dominate me.
Like, yeah, please sleep with my wife. I thought that was the point of it. I don't know what porn is anymore. Step siblings are involved now. It's a whole thing.
Porn I enjoy because I don't know it very well. So
I'm proving how much I'm not a cook by not understanding it. All right, so we've run to time now here. So do we have any a nice little piece of information to wrap up on, and then skedaddle?
Is this a question to me?
To everyone.
Oh, I had a thank you so much. I mean, I got nothing to share. I'm just enjoyed.
Yeah, this is a great.
I love learning, and I love learning that the U.S. is, totally not involved in Georgia at all. It's all Russia's fault. Thank you for telling me exactly what I'd been reading in my Western media. Yeah, nonstop.
I still like having discussions about Georgia because one, your alphabet's really cool. That's a big part of it. There's a Georgian restaurant here in town that has Georgian beer, and they won't let me keep the empty beer bottles at the end of it because, like, please let me keep your trash. The alphabet's really cool. They won't let me do it. I don't know why they have a recycling thing going on. Second, I haven't mentioned this, I love Georgia because every damn country is deciding to change its name at the moment, but like Georgia is the only one that would probably legitimately have a good reason to change its name. Like I don't care about Turkey or whatever the
Oh yeah,
fuck.
if you use Turkey in front of me, like we're not friends. I'm not gonna have you. I mean, given if any other government changed it, I'd be fine with it. Strictly because it's an Erdogan AKP ultra nationalist bullshit.
Yeah,
won't do it. Also, the Czechia one, dumb.
that didn't work.
No.
Like, it's been
Czech
10 years
Republic.
now. Yeah,
Also,
no
you look like a nerd pronouncing a country in the like language that they want you to. Like, come on, go around. Like, if you meet someone and they call Germany Deutschland, you run the other fucking way.
in like English, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. in
Obviously,
German,
in
it's
German
just normal.
it's normal. But also, why are they talking about like? I mean, the fact that then Deutschland would come up in a conversation also is striking. Unless you are watching maybe like Olaf Scholz himself.
They're like they use the correct word for Germany as they say the opening line of the Forbidden Verse. It's like, there's no other problems with this.
Yeah. So no.
But yeah, the Sarkat Velo probably. I just want my Google alerts to work and stop giving me alerts about what's happening in fucking Atlanta when I'm trying to find out what's happening.
Which,
Oh,
by the
God.
way, wait a minute, Atlanta, my other hometown.
Yeah.
some crazy things are happening there.
Oh,
Yeah,
Cup
horrible
City.
things, yeah.
yeah. Like
And
it's
it's
insane.
all Russian influence.
It's really funny because like sometimes like I was talking about the police stuff here and somebody wrote about Atlanta and I was like, I think you have the wrong Georgia. He's like, oh, so sorry, because it was like
I love that you're from both Georgias.
Yeah, this is a
Very
great argument.
confusing.
So back in Georgia, which one?
yeah, Georgia squared.
Yeah.
I'm like back in Georgia, people are they killed someone for protesting, and they took like many others for like for domestic terrorism charges, and everyone's
That's
like,
like
oh my God.
that's like a round at a pub quiz.
Yeah.
Which Georgia?
Which Georgia was it?
Which Georgia is Sopo talking about?
Exactly.
I mean, okay. Which Georgia executed an unarmed,
American Georgia.
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, that's a little when you start adding
activists,
like
yeah.
the finer details, it becomes easier that it's the U.S.
Which Georgia has a rapper influence their politics? How is that not the American one?
Shit, wait, fuck.
Oh my
No,
God.
wait, just yeah, George. I follow a lot of DJ Academics things. There's totally a lot of rappers.
We're gonna figure this out.
There are, yeah, and they go and like do like
Yeah.
like local, yeah.
But all right, so
The best one has been Lil Durk and Lori Lightfoot.
we will talk about
I
that.
mean, not in Georgia, but
Yeah,
in Chicago.
in Chicago.
yeah.
Well, in the state of Georgia, we had Killer Mike, who was like very
Yeah.
supportive of
Yeah,
leftist
true.
kind of stuff. He came to
Yeah.
Occupy and stuff like that.
That's right. Yeah. However, Sopa, thank you very much for coming on again and explaining Georgia to us. I think I ended the last podcast with that's everything you need to know about the country, but now I can confidently say with these 2 episodes, that's everything you need to know about the country. Where can people find you and your work?
On Twitter, SoapJap at SoapJap. Also, our podcast, Reimagining Soviet Georgia, if you're interested in getting to know Georgian history and in a more complex way. And also the Soviet Union. You can check it out. It's everywhere. So Reimagining Soviet Georgia.
Perfect. All right. With that,
Thank you so much for being
no problem.
for having me on again. Actually, it's really fun talking to you guys.
Thank you very much for coming on, and we will catch you, the listeners, on the bonus feed. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.